So in this week's video, we're going to look at some of the key mistakes you want to avoid when you're break building. I'm just going to be doing some pretty basic shots around the pink and black area that I think can make a really big difference to when you're trying to build your breaks. So just going to come away from the video for a second. There's quite a large percentage of the viewers watching the videos but not actually subscribing to the channel. It's totally free, so make sure you go over and make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you're not going to miss out on any future videos that come out. And like I say, make sure you leave loads of comments, and let's get back to the video. The first part I want to look at is I think one of the biggest things really that can help you break build around the black spot is whenever basically you're potting a red and playing position for the black, we need to be quite deliberate with what we're doing. And basically every time I come to the table and I'm looking at what red I'm going to play, I'm going to decide basically if I want to land slightly low on the black or high on the black. To me, every time you pot a red, you should be making one of them two choices, really, because then obviously that the more angle we've got on the black, it's then going to be easier to get onto the next red. Quite often, what happens obviously in the clubs is people are just potting a red, not really thinking about it too much, or not being, like I say, deliberate enough. And the cue ball quite often lands around this sort of straight area on the black or just off straight. And it's amazing how many times your break will end quite quickly after that. So sometimes when I work on stuff like this, or I'm doing lessons around this sort of stuff, I quite prefer just using literally one or two reds just as an example to try and keep it quite basic. So what I'm just going to go through first here is we've just got a red into the corner pocket. And what I'm looking at first is basically where that red is sort of in relation to the black and what my angle is on the shot. So I've got a straight shot in the corner. The black is already sort of parallel there with the black, so it's quite easy for me just to stun the cue ball here and leave the white slightly low on the black, and that the way I'm going to have a good angle to then play up for the next red. So that would be my plan before I play that shot. I think what happens quite a lot with break building is when we start playing snooker, obviously it's a very hard game, so most people are trying to get straight on the black just because the pot's easier. But obviously then you like I say, your breaks are not going to go very far because we can't do that much off a straight angle, or if there's not much angle to work with. So I'll just give you a little example here. Like I say, so a little stun shot on the red, just below centre. Hi everyone, so just want to do a quick video to announce this week's winner of the Century Q Tips giveaway. So we picked a winner at random from this week's video on the Practice Like a Pro, and the winner is at PostyBoy007. So well done, you've won your choice of the grade of Century Q Tips of your choice. So if you go in the description below, you'll be able to find out ways you can contact me, and we'll send the tips over to your address. So well done. So I've stunned the cue ball there, and this is exactly where I want to be on the black. So like I say, I'm a little bit low, and the great thing from these positions is I've also got choices of what I can play. The most common shot I would normally play from this position would be just another stun shot to come across here for the red. But also I could do other things. I could play like a soft screw shot to come on this side of the table, or even I could play a run through shot off the cushion and back out for the red. I've literally got three options here on this one shot. So it's showing you, like I say, you've got these options in a frame of snooker. When there's a lot more reds on the table, you know, there's obviously going to be less space, so these other options can really help you out in sort of tighter situations. So like I say, I'll go through this next shot. So just below centre, nice little stun shot on the black up for the red. So I've played the stun shot up for the red here, and then again basically what I said earlier, when I come to the red, the first thing I'm looking at is the angle of the shot, in working out, is it going to be easier playing for a high black or a low black. So just in this one position here, I'm looking at, I've got a slight angle. So I'm going to just drop that in quite softly and try and leave myself on a high black. Again, this is a really common shot in the club, I see, where I call it a bit of a nothing shot, where we're going to pot the red most of the time, but a lot of people run the cue ball through too far and they land in that sort of straight zone on the black, and then they're struggling to get on the next red. So I'm going to hit this shot just nice and soft and try and leave myself a high angle on the black. So you can see there I've come around and I've left myself a bit of an angle on the black. If I was going to be ultra critical, I would probably actually want that to be even slightly higher than that, so the angle would be even better to then come off the cushion for the next red. So like I say, when you're working on your break building, you don't have to use all of the reds. We can just sometimes use 1 or 2 reds to try and really like refine your positional play and make sure we're choosing the right shots and we're executing them how we want. But like I say, the main thing I want you to try and take from this is, every time you're potting a red, it doesn't matter where they are. I'll give you another example here. What I see quite a lot is, see, I've got this red in the corner, playing for the black here. When I was younger, like I say, I used to play like a stun shot, and quite often I would land again around this straight zone, and then I would have to play like a deep screw shot or something to try and keep the break going. So what I've tried to learn to do from these positions now is to play for a higher black. Again, that's going to give us a lot more options. The other mistakes I see in the club is people playing like a stun shot. The tip's not low enough, and then all of a sudden they've lost the cue ball down the table, and they sort of think they've just hit the shot like too hard or something because the cue ball's gone too far. But really they've approached the shot wrong, because sometimes they're playing for a low black in that position, which I think's the wrong shot. So when you're sort of stunning across from these sort of positions like this, I would prefer to be slightly lower on the white, just coming back a little bit there and leaving myself this sort of angle on the black. Because even if I just try and pot this black with no spin on, all right, you can see there I've had to do nothing with the cue ball, but it's come back like into the middle of the table, and that just opens up so much, like I say, different shots around the black spot. So like I say, the main 2 things when you're potting reds: can you land low on the black? If not, try and get used to playing more high blacks, because from there you can almost put the white anywhere you want on the table. So I'm just going to give you a few more examples of where I see these mistakes in the clubs, and I used to do it again when I was younger, in just a few different scenarios here where we're on a red and we're basically working out how to get the best position on the black. So this kind of shot here, I've got the red in the corner, the cue ball's going to come off the cushion, and what I see a lot of time, and again, like I say, I used to do this when I was younger, is a lot of people put maybe a bit of check side on this shot, which would be right hand side. So when it comes off the cushion, it's obviously it would straighten the cue ball up. But what can happen there is, if I'll try and give you an example. So I've got a little bit of right hand side on, potted the red, and then there you go, there's a really good example. You can see from there, it's checked off the cushion, but I've left myself nearly straight on the black. So you're just limiting yourself to what you can really do around that area. So what you've got to try to do instead, and this is where this is basically shot selection and just changing how you approach that shot. You've almost got to be a little bit braver with what you're doing, and obviously this is going to take a lot of practice to get confident enough to do this. But basically, if I do that shot again with no side, just middle of the ball, come off the cushion like that, if you have a look at that angle, I would actually much prefer being higher on the black like that. Now I know a lot of sort of amateurs and club players might look at that black and think, well, it's a much harder pot. And it is a little bit harder, But again, it just all comes down to practice. So from there, we can do a lot more with a cue ball, as you've seen before. If I hit middle of the white, quite softly, it's going to come straight off the cushion and pretty much straight back up into the middle of the table. I don't really have to manipulate the cue ball and put any spin on it. It's going to start doing that naturally. So sometimes, like I say, when you're practicing, I quite like just working on sometimes just one shot over and over again. So if you had a little bit of time in the club and you're not comfortable with these blacks, just set them up like I say, like that, and just do them over and over again, so you're getting used to the potting line and also how the cue ball is going to come off the cushion. So I'm potting the black there with no spin on, and it's coming up, yeah. So I can, you know, the repetition I prefer is, like I say, keeping it quite simple. Quite often, again, I see in the club, you know, like people doing routines where they've got all the reds on the table, all 15 reds or 10 reds, whatever it is, and it can be quite difficult, obviously, put the breaks together. I still think that's quite good practice also, but I think doing this kind of stuff as well, you're actually finding out quicker and better where you are going wrong during your breaks. And like I say, just doing shots over and over again, that's how, you know, I got better at them when I was younger. I was doing some of me like lineups, and I noticed I was making the same mistakes over and over again. So then I would like isolate that shot until I felt really comfortable doing it. So just a little recap on the first section there about obviously trying to leave angles on the blacks. That's the main thing I want you to try and do. You can see here just another example of where we don't want to be. This is what I see quite a lot in the club. So people are straight on their black, try and play a screw shot, and maybe they don't get enough spin in the cue ball. And I'm next to the side cushion now, and I've got a horrible cutback of a red into the corner pocket. So what's happening there is it's a really hard pot, and the cue ball is just going to be travelling away up the table, away from all probably the next reds and stuff. So that is what I see virtually every day in the clubs when I'm coaching people and we're working on break building. The other little thing to sort of take into consideration a little bit is, on club tables, if they're a bit slow and the cloths are a bit heavy, or you just generally, if you're struggling screwing back off them kind of shots, that's why I'm saying it's even more important to leave yourself these angles, because screwing back off this cushion, obviously you see a lot of professionals doing it on the TV or in other YouTube videos, but the fact is most of the time they're playing on proper star match tables with a match cloth, possibly even a heated table and new balls and everything. So that shot, to be honest with you, screwing off the cushion is a bit easier than on some of your club tables, as you'll know. So like I say, when you're practicing around the black area, it doesn't matter where your reds are. Just try and be a little bit more deliberate to leave yourself higher or low on the black to make the breaks a bit easier. And like I say, it's going to take a bit of practice, but I know that can make a big difference, because it did with me when I was younger doing my routines. So the follow-on part from that, basically just going step by step. So you've potted your red, you've left yourself a nice angle on the black here. I've got a nice high black. The next thing I see quite a lot in the clubs again is basically under hitting these kind of shots. So they might pop the black and come off the cushion, but the cue ball is often landing what we call low on the reds. And again, it's amazing how many times the breaks are ending from this position. You can maybe pot the red and then get nearly on a colour, but it's just going to get harder and harder. So again, it's this kind of practice I really would recommend trying to repeat as much as you can. So even just starting off on the black is fine as well. We don't have to take the red first. You can just put yourself on the black here and practice coming off the cushion here and seeing if we can get on these reds. So to get the cue ball where I want, I quite often imagine I want the cue ball to come up towards what I call like the pink line. So if you had a line going straight across the table here through the pink spot, I think that's a really good target. And I would imagine a lot of the time you're falling short of that pink line. So what we need to be careful of doing is, on this kind of shot, is we are playing a form of a stun shot, but most club players are going too low on the white. So like I say, it comes off the cushion, starts, and it's slowing the cue ball down very quickly. So I'm just going to go a little bit higher than I would do like a normal stun shot. But a lot of people, when they're playing these shots, they're way down here on the cue ball, and that's going to bring it back towards the cushion and slow the white down. So I'm just going to raise my bridge hand a little bit there, just a fraction. And if I go through there, you can see the cue ball come off the cushion there, pretty, you know, not too much of an angle, just back nicely, and I'm on that bottom red there. And the biggest thing for me when I'm playing these kind of shots is I want my hand on the table for the next shot. So, you know, like I say, these shots you cannot be too good at. If you go in the club, I sometimes say this to lads, and you go in the club and you've got 15-20 minutes practice before your friend comes in for a game. Just practice these kind of shots, because it's showing you exactly what you're doing. Also, it's showing you if you're maybe putting any unintentional side spin on as well by accident, because that's gonna change how the cue ball comes off the cushion. So what I do on these kind of shots is find the right height, but I have a trace of right on the cue ball as well, and that's what we call helping side, just to make sure it comes back this side of the table. So I'll do that again. This time I might even try and play it a little bit firmer, so I come higher on the reds. So not too low on the cue ball, trace of right, a little bit harder that time, so that's come up nicely. So when you're doing that, obviously you can see now the biggest thing is I'm on actually both of them reds, which means I can go back to the black from these positions. So it's what I call being high on the reds. So you can see what I said before about this sort of imaginary line through the pink line. I'm just above that. So I've like used that quite a lot just in my practice over the years, as like almost like a reference point of where I want to be, is like around that line there, because obviously in a frame of snooker, you know, the pack is obviously below the pink, and a lot of your reds are going to be around that position. So if you know, like I say, you can't be too good at these shots. So for me, the next step, like I say, from getting them angles on the blacks is making sure we then get high on the reds. Like I say, under hitting, it's just, you know, you're working away from everything, and it's going to be really difficult to keep your breaks going. And then obviously again, it's that whole process again of whatever red you're going to take, choose, are you going to play for a low black or a high black? And that's basically my thought process through every red when I'm especially playing for blacks. So the next mistake I see quite a lot, which is also a bit linked to the one I've just spoke about, is people playing blacks quite a lot, or even sometimes reds, and the cue ball is finishing near the side cushion. You know, I think this is a big one for club players. So basically what's happening is, again, just looking at this high black that we did before, it's almost like the same issues are happening again, but maybe even worse, where we're hitting too low on the cue ball because they're coming to the shot and they're basically telling themselves they're playing what like a normal stun shot. So then their brain is telling them to hit below lower, like below center on the cue ball. And sometimes if we're just a little bit too low, you can see there it's come off the cushion and just coming straight back towards the side cushion. And then again, linked to what I was saying on the previous mistake of I'm finishing really low on my reds, and it's just going to be, you know, really difficult to keep the breaks going. But like I say, it could be on any of these shots. So even you're not just doing it on blacks. You're looking out for these on these reds as well. So when you're playing off the cushion, it's about finding. Yes, it's a stun shot, but what I say is it's mainly about your tip position, finding the right height on the cue ball, and it's these different variations of stun basically. I actually feel like, for me, sometimes when I get these shots and I'm playing them how I want to be and keeping the cue ball away from the cushion, I almost feel like I'm nearly playing a sort of more of a stun run through shot, which I know might sound a bit strange, but that's how I had to approach it when I was younger, because me brain was telling us just to hit, you know, below centre, because that's what we'll get told to do, but it was coming back to the cushions too much. So again, I know I'm going to be just slightly higher than my normal stun shot here. So you can see there, it's come off the bottom cushion and it hasn't come back too far. And what we want to be when we're playing these shots is coming off the cushion. And I think one of the biggest things to, you know, keep the break going is for your next shot, whether it's a black or a red, you want your bridge hand on the table for the next shot. You know, the fact is, the more this cue ball comes further and further and back towards this side cushion, your percentages of even just potting the ball are coming down quite dramatically. And also, obviously, the controlling the cue ball is getting a lot harder. If we go closer to really close to the cushion here, even if it's an angle shot like that would be even worse. I can only obviously hit like the top of the cue ball, so I can't really do anything with it. And then I'm going to start running into problems from there. So, like I say, a massive thing I see is coming back to the side cushions too much, and it's amazing what you can do by just moving your tip slightly higher in this shot is what you want to be, to keep it more middle of the table. So I'll do one more again for you. So just a little bit higher. It still feels like a stun shot. I'm still being nice and positive through the ball. You can see there it's come off nicely, and the cue ball is still slightly working its way back off the cushion. I think a lot of people think when they go a bit higher, all of a sudden the cue ball is going to be going forward. But like I say, I'm only moving me tip up. Probably I would call it like a tip's width higher than a stun shot. So I feel like I'm close to centre, like I say, and sometimes with a tracer right, just to help it come back to where I want to be. So the next sort of mistake I just want to have a little look at is, say we've played a nice positional shot from a red, and we've got a nice angle like on a low black here to play up for the red in the middle of the table. There's obviously a couple of ways. There's a couple of ways mainly this shot I see go wrong. One of them is people not playing with enough stun on the ball, and the cue ball travels across towards the side cushion. So a little bit of like similar to the topic I was talking about before about the cue ball traveling to the side cushions. The other thing as well is when you're standing here and think about playing a stun shot, some people are also a bit worried that the cue ball might come up and hit the red. So what I would advise to do in these sort of positions, if it's just a simple routine like this, or especially when there's more balls on the table, so it's a bit more congested, is sometimes what I would do, and what you see the professionals do on the TV, is they'll walk around to behind the black here, and I would have a look at the line I want the cue ball to take after I've potted the black. So if I come and have a look at here, that's sort of my target line here, and again to finish around that pink line area that I spoke about earlier. So if I have a look from here, I've got quite a lot of space to miss the cannon on the red. When you stand on this side of the table, it sort of can look a little bit different. So like I say, come round and have a little look. It can give you a different perspective on the shot. You know, that doesn't mean obviously you're just going to play the shot a lot better, but it just gives you that bit more visualization of what you're actually trying to do in the line you want to take the cue ball up. And then, like I said before, it's about finding that right tip position for these variations of stun that we're going to need. So it's just from obviously years and years of practice and experience that I know on these shots I've picked me line. I know exactly where to put me tip and how the strength of the shot I'm going to play. That just comes down to I've done this thousands of times before. So I've got me line. I'm just a fraction below centre on the cue ball, and try and stun up for the red. So again, just to cover this kind of shot here, I've done what I said earlier of leaving myself a nice angle, this time low on the black. And we can, play a nice stun shot. But if we're not sure exactly where I want to be, come round, have a little look. So my line is coming off the black this way towards the pink line, like I say. So I've visualised that. Sometimes I even look at like maybe a little chalk mark on the cloth as like a target area, and that's my goal. So then I've from the practice again, I know where I need to put my tip, just to play this shot. So just a fraction below centre, try and get the pace right. So I've played that pretty much how I want, and then it's just related to all that stuff I've done today. The cue ball's gone up high enough so I could pot that red and then come back down to the black again to keep the break going. So again, just to go over, when we're potting reds from anywhere around this sort of area, I want your initial thought really to be, right, can I get either what was said is low on the black or high on the black? And it's just going to make you, like I say, your breaks a lot easier. We haven't got to play with loads of like deep screws and power or side spin. Again, I hear a lot of times in the club, people, even with a reasonable angle, thinking they've got to put loads of like a bit of side spin on to move the white, and it's not really. What we're trying to achieve is that the angle on the shot from the black is going to do most of the work for us. So you're not really playing with too much power. Again, if you're watching the snooker on the TV, and if you see a professional pot a red and the cue ball finishes pretty straight on the black, you'll probably see them pull like a bit of a face, a little bit of a grimace in the face, because they'll not be very happy with that. There's the odd time maybe, yes, you might want to be a bit straighter on the black, but I can, guarantee most of the time professionals are trying to be low or high. And that's when you see them the break just keeps going and going. And then, like I said before, they can get higher on the reds and then back to the black. So it's about basically trying to keep them sequences going as long as you can. So you're going to have to obviously put quite a bit of practice into that. And you'll see quite quickly what you're comfortable with and which ones you're maybe not so comfortable with. I tend to find obviously the lower blacks people can pick up quite quickly, because it is a slightly easier shot. I find when you start looking at higher blacks, people struggle with them a little bit because purely they don't put themselves in that position enough. And sometimes, yeah, you can make the odd 20, 30 or even higher, but the breaks are probably quite hard work. Once I started getting used to this with my break building when I was younger, it just made, like I say, I got used to it with a lot of practice. It just made things feel a lot easier. There's one other thing I think is quite important when you're in these positions and you're talking about shot selection. And it's something that I've brought up in a lot of lessons and not many people would even think about. And basically, again, just using one of the examples we've done today, I've got a nice angle on a lower black here. And like I said earlier, I've got options of playing like a stun shot across this side, or I could play a screw shot back to here. So they're like sort of my main two options, really. Now, because I'm actually left-handed, what I'll do most of the time is play across onto this side of the table. So you could call it like, the yellow side of the table, where the yellow spot is down this side, because when I play a stun shot across into that area, because obviously I can reach the shot a lot easier being left-handed, my area to put that cue ball in is quite a lot bigger than if I played it back to this side. If I played the black, I'll try and give you an example here. If I come back over this side of the table, okay, so that's quite a good example where I've tried to play a little screw shot for the black into the same, for the red into the same pocket, but I haven't quite got the screw right. All of a sudden I'm standing here and I can't reach that shot. So I'm going to have to go and get the rest out and play the red with the rest, which is obviously then a harder shot. So all of a sudden you can see how just for that one little shot selection, I'm making things a bit harder for myself. Whereas if I'd played the stun shot and it came up quite acute on that side of the table, it's not a problem. I can reach the red quite easy there and probably keep me break going for longer. So that's just like I say, another little thing I think you've got to be careful of. It was especially for me not being too tall, so I had to be a bit careful on what side of the table I was playing onto. But I do see a lot in the time in the club, people are playing these shots obviously, and they're sort of stretching. They can't even get down to the shot properly or anything, so it's like you're gonna have to get the rest out, and then like I say, things are just going wrong. So it's definitely, like I say, something that's part of your shot selection, trying to play into the bigger areas on the table where, like I say, if you're right-handed, you want to be on this side of the table because that area's a lot bigger. So like I say, just another little thing definitely to watch out for. So once you've tried some of them shots out I've been saying about getting high and low on the blacks, obviously the sort of follow-on we want to be trying to do is a routine where we try and put quite a few shots together. So I quite like this one because where the reds are, it's sort of making us play for higher blacks rather than low blacks, because if I stun some of these in here where the white would finish there, then obviously I would sometimes be hampered on the black because of that other red there. So I'm just going to go through this routine and basically try to put into practice what we've been talking about so far. So first shot, stun shot on the red to play for a high black. So first red down, I've come round, I've got a nice angle on the black. So again, just from the practice I've done, I know what height I want to hit the cue ball and what pace, just to come off one cushion and try and leave myself a choice of reds. So again, I've come up my next red. Obviously the angle here, it's just taking us that way anyway, so just a little bit lower on the cue ball just to slightly slow it down, just for another high black. So again, like I was saying at the very start about these decisions, every time I come to the red, I'm deciding, do I want to be low or high on the blacks? And like I said, I really like this routine because it's sort of promoting us to every time play higher on the blacks. So the fact is, the more times I put myself in this position, the better I'm going to be at it. If you do this routine and you just keep sort of playing stun shots for either a low black or landing, like I said, straight on the black, you're not really developing your game. So I'm deliberately playing these shots for a high black every time. So when they come up again in games and stuff, it's a lot more familiar. So like I said earlier, every time I'm potting a red here, I'm thinking, am I going to land low on the black or high on the black? And obviously this routine really, because of where the reds are positioned, is making us play for a high black, because I don't want to be stunning the cue ball down here and basically queuing over one of them reds. So it's making us do that, and basically the more times I put myself in that position, the quicker I'm going to get better at high blacks. So it's just about putting yourself in this position more often, and you'll quickly get better at doing it, and you'll realise that I don't need to put virtually no spin on these shots, and the cue ball is going to come off the cushion and be, in a nice area for the next reds. So just middle of the white, just try and come off the one cushion. You can see there, no spin, and I'm right in the middle of the table for a choice of the next reds. So I've come up, I've got a nice position here where I could take either of these reds. So again, I'm leaving myself choices, which I think is obviously a big part of break building as well. So even this little shot, the topics we've already talked about today are going to come up on this shot again. I don't want to be playing with any sort of check side, because then I'm going to land too straight on the black. And the other thing is, I don't want to hit it too softly. And that's the other thing I see in the club all the time, is the white just staying quite close to this side cushion, and they're making the black much harder. So I'm trying to come off the cushion, back again for a high black, and I want my hand on the table. They're the two main things I'm trying to do from this shot. So again, I'm not really putting any spin on the shot, I'm just trying to judge the pace off the cushion. So I've come around pretty much perfect here on the black. I've got two reds left, so this time what I try and do in this position is play for both reds in one shot. And again, it's just covering bits of what we've talked about earlier. So this time I'm going to play slightly higher on the white to come off one cushion and come up that side of the table. So I could be on basically a choice of the two reds. So if my position goes slightly wrong either way, I should be on one of them. But I'm trying to, again, put myself in a big area. So I've got a choice of two reds. So I'll go through my normal routine, check my angle, think about where I'm going to hit on the cue ball, and then the pace. Try and keep your head nice and still. So you can see from here, the last shot on the black, I've hit a little bit too soft. But because I've chose the right shot, I've still given myself a reasonable shot at this red in the corner. Ideally, again, I wanted to do what I mentioned earlier in the video, is run up to closer to the pink line. So I've just slightly under hit that shot, but I've still got a one here in the corner. So this one, I'm going to come off the cushion again and try and come up for a high black again as well. So just above centre, try and get the pace right. Too soft. So I've potted the red with the rest, come off the cushion, and again, my pace is a little bit short. And this is obviously earlier about talking where we don't want to be. So even though the last shot I planned in my head what I want to do, we're not always going to execute it exactly how we want. So the funny thing is, when I think back to just my last couple of shots, it was actually the black I had before where I tried to run through off the cushion to come up here. That's actually where it's went a bit wrong, because I underhit that shot. Then I had to use the rest, and just my pace control was a little bit out with the rest because it's a slightly harder shot. So you can see now how following on, the break's getting a little bit harder and harder. So this is probably so far the first sort of recovery shot I'm going to have to play with a lot more spin. So it's a deep screw off the cushion out for the red. So we've potted the black off the cushion. You can see I've slightly over screwed it, but funny enough, some of the stuff we spoke about already is just all coming out right now. As in, one of the last sort of key things I spoke about was which side of the table you're playing onto. So even though I'm not very tall, but because I've played this shot on my side of the table, being left-handed, I can just about reach this red. So it makes a big difference to, you know, me potting percentages on this shot. It's still a bit of a tricky shot, definitely missable. The other thing that's slightly helping is, because it's my last red, I'm then going to play actually this time up for the blue and then play for the yellow, because that's the easier way of clearing the colours. It'll be quite a hard shot to play for the black, and then to be fair, black to yellow is a harder shot anyway, so I'd actually rather play for the blue here anyway. So check the potting angle, come around. This time I'm going to come off two cushions to try and play for the blue. Far too hard. Here we go. So I've come up for the blue. Again, I've just slightly overrun it, so you can sort of see the last 3 or 4 shots. I'm just slightly trying to catch up with myself. And to be honest with you, it's just through probably experience and the practice over the years that I can maybe keep the break going. But it's not obviously exactly where I want to be. But I've got an angle here. I'm going to run the white down off the bottom cushion and back up for the yellow. So I'm playing this shot here just above centre with a trace of right hand side. So when it hits the cushion, it straightens up and hopefully comes back up for the yellow. So I've got my line. I've got my tip position. I'm just trying to not hit it too hard because the angle's going to do a lot of the work for us. So I've potted the blue, come up, and I've got a reasonable shot of the yellow. So I'm down to the colours. I'm on the yellow. It's not too bad of a position. I'm just going to try and play a run through shot off one cushion and back down for the green. So, you can probably see from the last few shots, like I say, I've been slightly catching up with myself. I'm just about back in good position here on the green. So, this is just more of a natural shot here, what you'd expect to have on the green, where I'm just going to drop it in softly and come off the side cushion for the brown, not really any spin. Nice and soft. I'm on the brown. So I'm on the brown. This is not too bad. Again, you know, generally you would want a slight angle. As you can see, it's quite straight. So I'm going to have to rely on me cue power a bit in screwing back off this side cushion for the blue in the middle. So nice and low. Nice long backswing to get the screw back. So I've judged that quite nicely. I've got a nice little angle on the blue. I'm just going to drop this in softly. This is actually, just while I remember before I play that shot, actually, I think this is another massive shot connected to one of the issues I spoke about earlier about what side of the table you can play onto. So straight away, I'm obviously left-handed. So dropping the blue in for the pink for that side of the table is definitely my preferred way of playing it. If obviously most people are right-handed, again, you want to practice these shots, and it might be, you're probably going to find it's better you playing a bit of a screw shot back for this side of the pink, because your area is much bigger. So it's interesting just how one of the things I spoke about earlier is even come up here on the blue. So just drop it in nice and softly for the pink. So I've dropped it in for the pink. It's not a bad position. I can should be to just roll this through. I've got a slight angle, but to me it's not quite enough to stun across. So I'm just going to try and drop this through nice and softly for the black to finish off. So you can see there, I've managed to clear that clearance up there, just trying to talk through all of the shots. It's actually quite tricky, obviously, when I'm trying to execute the shots as well, but I'm trying to obviously fully explain my thought process through every shot. And like I say, I think it's a good little routine that for all the things I spoke about today. So making sure, you know, we're playing for high or low blacks off every red if we can, just to make things a bit easier. Yes, I had a few sort of obviously recovery shots sort of through the middle there, and managed to recover it nicely on the colours. But that's obviously part of the game as well, that you sort of learn with the more you play. So like I say, I hope you find sort of them, you know, little pointers and everything quite useful. But the fact is, you're going to have to put obviously quite a lot of practice in to get used to, you know, especially the shots where you're coming off the cushions, because a lot of that comes down to feel. I can't really teach you exactly how hard to hit a shot. That just comes from a lot of repetition. So like I say, have a tried some of them different scenarios and be a lot more deliberate with your positional play on the blacks.